High Admiral Zethkara floated in the zero-gravity command chamber of the Eternal Vigilance, her translucent fins rippling with barely contained excitement. The massive dreadnought hung motionless in the void, its biometallic hull absorbing all electromagnetic radiation to maintain perfect stealth. Through the panoramic viewing ports, the distant star soul burned like a pale yellow ember, its third planet barely visible as a tiny blue-green dot. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had overseen 1,000 conquered worlds across the galaxy's spiral arms. Commander Veltar's 6 tentacles danced across the bioneural control interface with practiced precision. Cascading streams of data flowed through his consciousness as he interfaced directly with the ship's sensory grid. "The primitive species continues their chaotic existence, Admiral. They show no signs of detecting our observation posts. Our stealth fields remain uncompromised after 37 standard cycles of surveillance." Zethkara's compound eyes, each capable of processing thousands of visual spectrums simultaneously, focused on the holographic display that materialized before her. The image showed Earth in exquisite detail, swirling white clouds, vast blue oceans, and the geometric patterns of urban sprawl that marked the presence of civilization. For 3 of their years, the hegemony's finest intelligence operatives had been watching, cataloging, preparing for what should be a textbook conquest. These humans appeared to be perfect specimens, aggressive enough to be useful as shock troops in future campaigns, yet primitive enough to be easily controlled once their neural inhibitors were deployed. The psychological profiles suggested a species driven by territorial instincts and tribal loyalties, making them ideal candidates for pacification through selective leadership elimination. "And their military capabilities?" Zethkara inquired, though she already knew the answer from previous briefings. "Laughably crude," Veltar replied with what passed for amusement among his species, his head tendrils quivering with barely suppressed mirth. "Chemical propulsion systems that would have been obsolete in our civilization 50 millennia ago. Kinetic projectile weapons. Primitive nuclear devices that split atoms rather than manipulating quantum fields. They've barely achieved faster-than-light travel, and only through the most inefficient methods imaginable. Crude alkebuyer drives that require enormous energy expenditure for minimal results." The commander paused, accessing additional data streams. "Their largest warships would be outclassed by our escort frigates, Admiral. The humans show no understanding of gravitational manipulation, zero-point energy extraction, or quantum entanglement weaponry. Their most advanced vessels still rely on fusion reactions for power generation." Zethkara's fins shimmered with satisfaction. After the disaster at Proxima Centauri, where an entire invasion fleet of 47 vessels had been lost to an unexpected solar flare that the target species had somehow predicted and exploited using crude but effective magnetic field manipulation, the High Command had insisted on extensive observation periods before any military action. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years by being thorough, methodical, and overwhelmingly superior in every engagement. This time, they would observe, learn, and strike with such overwhelming force that resistance would be futile. "Population analysis?" she requested. 8 billion individuals distributed across 7 continental masses, Veltar reported. Highly fragmented into territorial subdivisions they call nations. No unified planetary government, no coordinated defense network, no standardized technology base. They actually maintain separate military forces that occasionally engage in combat with each other. The species appears to be in a constant state of low-level conflict. This was even better than expected. A divided species would be infinitely easier to conquer than a unified one. Historical precedent suggested that humans would likely surrender individual territories rather than coordinate an effective planetary defense. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered, her voice carrying across the command chamber with crystalline authority. "Deploy the neural mapping drones. I want complete psychological profiles of their leadership castes within 1 solar rotation. Focus on decision-making patterns, fear responses, and submission triggers." Dozens of microscopic probes launched silently from the Eternal Vigilance, their quantum signatures undetectable by human technology. They would infiltrate Earth's communication networks, analyze behavioral patterns, and identify the key individuals whose elimination would ensure swift planetary capitulation. As the massive alien vessel adjusted its position behind the kilometer-wide asteroid they'd been using as cover, its movements synchronized with the rock's orbital mechanics to maintain perfect concealment. Neither Zethkara nor her crew noticed the small human probe that had been silently recording their every move from the shadow of a nearby moon. The probe had been there for 6 weeks, its passive sensors drinking in every detail of the alien vessel's routine. Its quantum-encrypted data bursts, transmitted in microsecond pulses during solar flare activity to mask the signals, had already reached Earth and were being analyzed by minds that the hegemony had drastically underestimated. The war was about to begin, and neither side fully understood what they were about to face. Dr. Elena Rodriguez rubbed her bloodshot eyes as she stared at the cascade of data streaming across her 3-monitor setup at the Atacama Deep Space Communications Array. The facility, perched 5,000 meters above sea level in the Chilean desert, was humanity's most sensitive listening post, a collection of massive radio telescopes that could detect a cell phone signal from Jupiter. 3 months into her new position as Senior SETI Research Coordinator, and she was already questioning her career choices. The transition from theoretical astrophysics at MIT to practical extraterrestrial intelligence research had been jarring. So far, her nights had been filled with nothing but cosmic background radiation, the rhythmic pulses of distant pulsars, and the occasional false alarm from Earth-based interference. Until 3:17 a.m. on a frigid Tuesday morning. That's not right," she muttered, her breath visible in the poorly heated control room. The signal pattern displayed on her primary monitor was too regular, too mathematically precise to be natural. But unlike the deep space origins she'd expected to find someday, this transmission was coming from within their own solar system, specifically from somewhere beyond Jupiter's orbit. Her hands moved frantically across the keyboard, routing the signal through every analysis program the facility possessed. The fast Fourier transform showed impossible frequency stability. The pattern analysis revealed layered encoding that suggested multiple data streams. Most disturbing of all, the carrier wave was utilizing a frequency modulation technique that should have been impossible to generate with any known human technology. Elena's coffee grew cold as she worked through the night, cross-referencing the signal against every known human space mission, classified military project, and experimental communication protocol. Nothing matched. The encryption was unlike anything in human databases, not because it was more complex, but because it followed completely alien mathematical principles. By dawn, she had isolated 17 distinct transmission sources, all originating from the same region of space beyond the asteroid belt. The signals weren't random, they followed a precise schedule, broadcasting in coordinated bursts every 4.7 hours with clockwork precision. Elena reached for her secure phone, then hesitated. Who would she call? NASA would demand weeks of verification. The military would likely classify everything and remove her from the project. The signal wasn't threatening, if anything, it seemed like routine data transmission. But it was undeniably not human in origin. Making a decision that would change the course of human history, she instead quietly began a comprehensive recording and analysis protocol. If this was what she thought it was, first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. She wanted absolute certainty before triggering what could be a global panic. Over the following 3 weeks, Elena's careful observations revealed a disturbing pattern. She identified 43 distinct signal sources, all positioned throughout the outer solar system like invisible sentinels. The transmissions weren't random communications, they were systematic, methodical, thorough. They were scans, detailed electromagnetic sweeps of Earth's surface, transmitted with increasing frequency and precision. Population centers were being mapped with resolution that could identify individual city blocks. Military installations were being cataloged with surgical accuracy. Communication networks were being analyzed and their encryption protocols reverse-engineered. To her growing horror, Elena began to recognize the methodology. It was identical to the preliminary reconnaissance protocols outlined in her graduate coursework on theoretical first contact scenarios, except these weren't human protocols. Someone was watching them. Someone was learning about them. And they were being very, very thorough about it. Elena's hands trembled as she compiled her findings into an encrypted report. The classified emergency contact she'd been given during her security clearance briefing had seemed like a formality at the time, a relic of Cold War paranoia. Now, as she stared at undeniable evidence of systematic alien surveillance, that phone number represented humanity's first warning system. As she typed her report, categorizing each signal source and analyzing the patterns that suggested imminent action rather than passive observation, Elena realized she was likely the first human being to detect the opening moves of what appeared to be a carefully planned invasion. Her finger hovered over the send button for a full minute, knowing that once she transmitted this report, there would be no going back. The world would change forever. Then, thinking of the billions of people sleeping peacefully below, unaware that they were being watched by something vast and alien, she pressed send. The message rocketed through encrypted channels toward a classified facility buried beneath the Colorado mountains, where it would trigger protocols that hadn't been activated since the height of the Cold War. Elena Rodriguez, a quiet astrophysicist who had only wanted to listen to the stars, had just fired the first shot in humanity's defense against an enemy they didn't even know existed. Captain James Mitchell stared at the diagnostic readout with barely concealed frustration, the blue glow of the holographic displays casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. The experimental stealth frigate USS Phantom drifted silently through the outer asteroid belt, supposedly the most advanced warship humanity had ever constructed, yet it was running 3 days behind schedule on what should have been a routine shakedown cruise. The Phantom represented 15 years of black-budget development, a marriage of reverse-engineered alien technology recovered from the Roswell incident and cutting-edge human engineering. Its quantum stealth systems could bend electromagnetic radiation around the hull, rendering it effectively invisible to conventional sensors. Its experimental Alcubierre drive could achieve faster-than-light travel without the massive energy requirements of traditional warp cores. On paper, it was a masterpiece. In reality, half the new systems were experiencing cascading failures. The quantum drive was generating harmonics that made the entire ship vibrate like a tuning fork, and now his communications officer was insisting she detected what could only be described as alien transmissions. "Sir, I'm telling you, these aren't human signals," Lieutenant Ashley Parker insisted for the third time in 20 minutes, her voice tight with exhaustion and mounting frustration. The young officer had graduated top of her class from the Naval Communications Academy, specializing in xenolinguistic protocols, a field that had been purely theoretical until this moment. The encryption algorithms are completely foreign, utilizing mathematical principles I've never encountered. And they're coming from coordinates that our navigation systems indicate should be empty space. Mitchell sighed deeply, rubbing his temples where a stress headache was building. The Phantom's maiden voyage was already a bureaucratic nightmare. Delays meant budget reviews, and budget reviews meant congressional hearings where aging politicians would question every expense down to the coffee rations. He didn't need his crew chasing phantoms on top of everything else. "Run a full-spectrum scan on those coordinates," he ordered, pulling up the tactical display on his command console. "But I want absolute emission silence. We're already behind schedule. I don't need command thinking we're pursuing conspiracy theories instead of completing our mission parameters." What they found defied every principle of physics Mitchell thought he understood. The passive sensors, utilizing the Phantom's experimental quantum resonance detectors, technology that had cost more than most nations' entire defense budgets, revealed a massive structure hanging motionless in space. The object was easily twice the size of humanity's largest dreadnought, its biometallic hull absorbing electromagnetic radiation across all spectrums. It was completely invisible to conventional detection methods, a ghost ship that should have been impossible to hide. "Sweet Jesus," whispered Ensign Rodriguez from the tactical station, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the sensor calibration. "Captain, that thing is armed. I'm reading energy signatures that make our fusion cannons look like firecrackers. Those weapon ports, sir, they could probably crack a moon." Mitchell felt his blood turn to ice as the implications crashed over him. "Are there any more of them?" The next 15 minutes of intensive scanning revealed a truth that would haunt Mitchell's dreams for years to come. 43 similar vessels were positioned throughout the outer solar system, arranged in a precise formation that spoke of military planning and overwhelming force. all invisible to human detection, all watching Earth with the patience of apex predators studying their prey. Sir, Parker's voice was barely above a whisper. I've been analyzing their transmission patterns using the Academy's theoretical xenolinguistic matrices. The data structure suggests, Sir, I think they're coordinating invasion preparations. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mitchell stared at the tactical display, watching as computer algorithms highlighted each alien vessel's position relative to Earth's orbital mechanics. They weren't random observers. They were positioned to eliminate Earth's orbital defense platforms and cut off escape routes to Luna and Mars colonies. Captain Mitchell made the hardest decision of his naval career. Breaking the communication silence that was supposed to protect their experimental mission, he transmitted everything they'd discovered on an emergency channel directly to Earth Defense Command. The data burst, encrypted with quantum keys that would take centuries to break, contained detailed scans of each alien vessel, analysis of their weapons systems, and Parker's preliminary translation of their communication protocols. As the transmission raced toward Earth at the speed of light, carrying humanity's first concrete proof that they were not alone in the universe and were very likely about to be invaded, Mitchell ordered his ship to maintain distance and continue observing. Neither he nor his crew realized that their passive quantum sensors had been broadcasting a distinctive resonance signature that the alien ships had been monitoring for the past several hours. Admiral Zethkara, reviewing the unexpected detection from her command chamber, was now very aware that her meticulously planned invasion had been compromised. The war was about to begin whether humanity was ready or not. Admiral Zethkara's command chamber erupted in controlled chaos as sensor alerts flooded the holographic displays with cascading red warnings. The bioneural interfaces that connected her directly to the ship's consciousness screamed with alarm signals as detection protocols that had never failed in 50,000 years of galactic conquest suddenly registered a massive security breach. "How is this possible?" she demanded, her translucent fins rippling with a combination of anger and something she hadn't experienced in centuries. Genuine confusion. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across her aquatic features as she floated before the tactical display. "Our stealth technology is perfect. We've observed 1,000 worlds across 17 galactic sectors without a single detection incident." Commander Veltar's 6 tentacles worked frantically at his bioneural interface station, his consciousness diving deep into the ship's sensor networks to understand what had gone catastrophically wrong. "Admiral, the human vessel is utilizing some form of quantum resonance detection we've never encountered before. It's actually more sophisticated than our own sensor arrays in several key parameters." The words hung in the chamber like a physical blow. The hegemony's technological superiority was absolute. It had to be. Their empire spanning 12,000 years had been built on the foundation of overwhelming technological advantage. These humans had barely achieved interplanetary travel a century ago, according to their intelligence reports. Could they have received outside assistance? Zethkara asked, though even as she spoke, she knew the question was absurd. The hegemony controlled this entire sector of the galaxy. No other spacefaring civilizations existed within 1,000 light-years of this primitive star system. "Impossible, Admiral," Veltar replied, his head tendrils writhing with stress as more data flowed through his neural connection. "I'm analyzing the human vessel's quantum signature. The technology is definitely indigenous, crude in some ways, but utilizing principles we've never seen before. They're manipulating quantum fields in ways our science deemed impossible." Additional tactical officers began reporting from their stations throughout the command chamber. "Admiral, the human vessel is maintaining distance but continuing active scans. They're mapping our entire fleet deployment with increasing accuracy. Their communication burst reached their homeworld 17 minutes ago," another officer added. "Quantum encrypted transmission on frequencies we can't decode. Admiral, they know we're here." Zethkara's mind raced through strategic calculations that had served her through countless successful campaigns. The original invasion plan had been elegant in its simplicity. Simultaneous neural bombardment of all major population centers to eliminate leadership and military coordination, followed by systematic occupation of a demoralized and leaderless world. The humans would wake up to find their governments gone and their resistance futile. But if the humans now knew they were being watched, if they were already mobilizing their primitive but apparently more dangerous than anticipated military forces, analysis of human military doctrine, she commanded, calling up data files that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. Limited information available, Admiral, the intelligence officer reported. Human military history shows a preference for unconventional tactics. They appear to engage in what they term total war, complete destruction of enemy forces rather than strategic objective achievement. Psychological profiles suggest they may not surrender even when facing overwhelming odds. This was completely contrary to every civilization the hegemony had ever encountered. Rational species calculated acceptable losses and surrendered when resistance became mathematically futile. It was how wars were supposed to work. Admiral, the tactical officer's voice carried an edge of alarm. I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the human homeworld. Their defense networks are powering up across the entire planet. Whatever their vessel transmitted, it's triggered a full military mobilization. Zethkara stared at the tactical display showing Earth surrounded by thousands of tiny energy signatures, human vessels, defense platforms, orbital installations. On paper, they were still outgunned 5-1. But the quantum detection technology had shattered her confidence in their intelligence assessments. Accelerate to Phase 3, she ordered, her voice carrying across the command chamber with crystalline authority, despite her internal doubts. All ships are to begin final approach vectors. We strike in 8 hours instead of the planned 48. As her fleet began moving toward Earth in perfect formation, Admiral Zethkara failed to account for one crucial factor that no amount of observation could have revealed. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history as persistence hunters, chasing prey across vast distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. They had developed not just the physical capability for extended conflict, but the psychological framework to view warfare as a test of will rather than merely strategic calculation. The hegemony was about to discover that some species didn't fight to achieve rational objectives. They fought to prove they couldn't be beaten. And in all their 12,000 years of galactic dominance, they had never encountered anything quite like that before. Warning signals continued to cascade across the command chamber displays as 43 of the galaxy's most advanced warships accelerated toward a confrontation with a species that had just revealed they possessed technology the hegemony didn't understand, fighting doctrine they'd never encountered, and a determination that defied all rational analysis. General Patricia Hayes stood in the underground command bunker buried 3 kilometers beneath Cheyenne Mountain, her steel-gray eyes reflecting the harsh glow of dozens of tactical displays showing humanity's mobilization for a war none of them had seen coming. The reinforced concrete walls, designed to withstand nuclear strikes, now hummed with the electromagnetic interference of quantum communication arrays linking every military installation on Earth and beyond. 18 hours had passed since Captain Mitchell's Discovery transmission had triggered Protocol 7, the classified response plan for confirmed extraterrestrial threats that military strategists had hoped would never be needed. In those 18 hours, humanity had transformed from a peaceful spacefaring civilization into a war machine that would have impressed their most violent ancestors. "Status report," she barked, her voice cutting through the organized chaos of the command center where hundreds of officers coordinated the largest military mobilization in human history. Colonel Anderson looked up from his holographic display, his face grim with the weight of impossible numbers. 43 confirmed alien vessels moving into attack formation, General. Deep space sensors indicate they'll be in effective weapons range in approximately 4 hours. Mass spectrometer analysis of their engine emissions suggests technology at least 1,000 years beyond our current capabilities. Hayes nodded curtly. On paper, humanity was facing annihilation. And our response? Every available combat vessel in the solar system is moving to intercept coordinates. Anderson continued, his fingers dancing across the tactical interface. The Roosevelt, Beijing, and New Geneva carrier battle groups have formed up at Luna's L4 Lagrange point. The Yamato and Hood dreadnought squadrons are holding position at Mars orbital stations. Terrestrial defense platforms across Earth, Luna, and the asteroid mining colonies are online and tracking targets. He paused, consulting additional data streams. Total available force, 237 combat vessels ranging from destroyer class to our newest dreadnoughts, plus 612 fighter squadrons and approximately 40,000 orbital defense platforms. Hayes smiled grimly. The aliens clearly expected humans to fight like every other civilized species they'd encountered, defensively, predictably, rationally. They were about to discover that humanity had never been particularly rational when it came to warfare. Intelligence analysis of enemy capabilities? She demanded. Lieutenant Commander Foster emerged from behind a bank of quantum computers, carrying a tablet loaded with data that had taken every cryptanalyst on Earth working in parallel to decode. We've finished analyzing the intercepted alien communications, General. They're definitely planning simultaneous strikes on all major population centers, followed by what appears to be some kind of neural suppression bombardment. Neural suppression? Best assessment suggests a form of mind control technology, General. Their battle doctrine appears to assume that eliminating leadership and deploying neural inhibitors will result in immediate planetary surrender. They seem to expect us to capitulate once their initial barrage demonstrates their technological superiority. Hayes felt something cold and predatory stir in her chest, the same feeling that had driven human armies to victory against impossible odds for millennia. The aliens had made a fundamental error in their strategic planning. They assumed humans would fight to minimize losses rather than to win at any cost. Open a channel to all fleet commanders, she ordered. Authorization Omega-77. As the quantum communication network came alive, linking her directly to every ship captain and station commander in the solar system, Hayes began issuing orders that would have seemed insane to any conventional military strategist. Instead of forming traditional defensive lines around Earth, humanity's fleet scattered into seemingly random positions throughout the inner solar system. Instead of concentrating firepower to protect major population centers, they positioned themselves to attack from angles the aliens wouldn't expect. Admiral Reese, take the Third Fleet and position your ships in the asteroid belt, engines cold, using the mining platforms as cover. When they begin their attack run, hit them from behind. General Morrison, deploy your Marine Expeditionary Forces to the captured alien probe sites. I want boarding parties ready to take any disabled enemy vessels. Colonel Kim, reprogram every orbital manufacturing facility to produce kinetic kill vehicles. I don't care if we bankrupt the colonial economies. Turn every piece of space junk into a weapon. The aliens were expecting humans to fight defensively, to form neat battle lines and engage in predictable fleet actions. Instead, Hayes was deploying humanity's greatest tactical advantage, their complete willingness to turn any environment into a battlefield and any object into a weapon. As the final orders went out across the solar system, humanity's response became clear. They weren't just defending Earth, they were turning the entire solar system into a trap. Every asteroid, every space station, every commercial vessel was being converted into part of a vast military machine designed for one purpose: the complete destruction of the enemy. The aliens were expecting a civilized war with rational objectives and acceptable losses. They were about to face humanity's preferred method of conflict resolution: total victory or mutual annihilation, with no middle ground acceptable. The battle began at 1432 Greenwich Mean Time when Admiral Zethkara's fleet emerged from their stealth positions and opened fire on what their targeting systems had identified as the primary human defensive formations. 43 alien dreadnoughts unleashed their plasma lances in perfect coordination, their bioneural targeting computers calculating trajectories with mathematical precision that should have guaranteed total destruction of human resistance. Brilliant streams of coherent energy carved through the vacuum of space with devastating beauty, each lance carrying enough power to boil away atmosphere from a small moon. The plasma beams struck their targets with pinpoint accuracy, obliterating asteroids, space debris, and what appeared to be poorly concealed human vessels in spectacular explosions that lit up the darkness between worlds. Direct hits on 23 primary targets, reported Commander Veltar from his bioneural interface, satisfaction rippling through his tentacles as he processed the sensor data. Human fleet appears scattered and in complete disarray. No coordinated response detected. Admiral Zethkara's fins shimmered with vindication. Despite the unexpected detection, despite their concerns about human technology, The battle was proceeding exactly as planned. Begin the neural bombardment sequence of their primary world. Once their leadership is pacified, we can proceed with standard occupation protocols. The massive alien warships began adjusting their positions for the second phase of attack, their weapons arrays reconfiguring to deploy the neural suppression technology that had subjugated 100 worlds. But as they maneuvered into optimal bombardment positions, something impossible happened. The command chamber of the Eternal Vigilance suddenly shook as multiple impacts struck their shields in rapid succession. "Report!" Zethkara snapped, her compound eyes scanning the tactical displays for threats that shouldn't exist. "Unknown weapons fire from everywhere," the tactical officer replied, his voice strained with confusion and growing fear. "Admiral, the humans aren't where our sensors indicated. They're behind us, above us, scattered throughout the entire combat zone in positions that should be impossible to achieve." On the main holographic display, human ships seemed to materialize from empty space like vengeful ghosts. The USS Phantom led the charge, its quantum stealth systems allowing it to appear directly astern of a hegemony dreadnought before unleashing a full barrage at point-blank range. The experimental human weapons, crude fusion cannons that the aliens had dismissed as primitive, punched through energy shields that had never failed in 10,000 years of warfare. "How are they moving so fast?" Veltar demanded, his consciousness reeling as he tried to process the impossible sensor readings. "Our intelligence indicated their vessels were barely capable of sustainable interplanetary travel. What the hegemony's careful observations had failed to discover was that humanity's primitive technology included gravitational manipulation drives that could accelerate ships at rates that would have been instantly fatal to most galactic species. Humans, having evolved under the crushing gravity of a dense world and possessing skeletal and cardiovascular systems adapted for extreme physical stress, could survive acceleration forces that would have liquefied their enemies. Human fighters dove through the alien formation like metallic hornets, pulling 30 G-turns that defied every principle of civilized space combat. Their pilots, encased in gravity-damping suits and sustained by stimulants that would have killed most sentient beings, maneuvered their craft in ways that no rational tactical computer could predict or counter. But it wasn't just their impossible maneuvers that shattered the hegemony's confidence. It was their complete disregard for conventional military doctrine. Instead of forming battle lines, human ships attacked from every direction simultaneously. Instead of protecting their larger vessels, they used them as bait to draw alien fire while smaller craft closed for killing strikes. Captain Rodriguez of the destroyer Valkyrie rammed his ship directly into the shield generators of an alien cruiser, his crew evacuating through teleporter systems moments before impact. The explosion created a gap in the enemy formation that 3 human assault squadrons immediately exploited. Admiral Morrison's marine boarding parties, launched from concealed positions in the asteroid belt, attached themselves to alien hulls like parasites and began cutting through armor with industrial plasma torches. They weren't trying to capture the ships, they were turning them into bombs. As human ships swarmed through the alien formation like antibodies attacking an infection, Admiral Zethkara began to understand the magnitude of her miscalculation. The humans weren't fighting to achieve tactical objectives or minimize casualties. They were fighting to completely annihilate their enemies, and they were willing to sacrifice everything to do it. "All ships, emergency withdrawal," she commanded. But even as the order went out across the fleet communication network, she knew it was too late. The humans had turned the entire battle zone into a killing field, and they weren't going to let anyone escape alive. The battle lasted 4 hours and 13 minutes. When the carnage finally ended, Admiral Zethkara floated in the cramped emergency pod that had automatically ejected from her destroyed flagship, watching through the viewport as human ships methodically hunted down the survivors of what had once been the hegemony's most elite invasion fleet. The Eternal Vigilance, pride of the hegemony navy and veteran of 100 successful conquests, now drifted as a gutted wreck among the debris field that had once been 43 of the galaxy's most advanced warships. Emergency beacons wailed across dozens of frequencies as escape pods scattered through the void like seeds in a cosmic wind, their occupants hoping desperately that someone would come to rescue them before human boarding parties arrived. Of the massive fleet that had entered Earth's solar system with such confidence, only 7 vessels had managed to escape back to hyperspace. and those only because they had been positioned at the formation's outer edge when the human trap was sprung. The rest were either destroyed outright or, like her own command ship, disabled and boarded by humans who fought with a combination of technological innovation and primal savagery that defied all understanding. What disturbed Zethkara most profoundly wasn't the defeat itself. Every military commander understood that was always a possibility in warfare. What shattered her worldview was how the humans had achieved it, and what that implied about everything the hegemony thought it knew about galactic civilization. They hadn't won through superior technology, though their innovations had proven devastatingly effective. Human gravitational drives were crude compared to hegemony bioneural propulsion systems, but they could generate acceleration forces that no other species could survive. Their weapons were primitive fusion-based systems compared to plasma lance technology, but they fired them from positions that should have been impossible to achieve. They hadn't won through better strategy, though their tactics had been brilliantly executed. The scattered positioning that had initially appeared to be panic-driven chaos was revealed to be a carefully orchestrated trap that turned the entire solar system into a killing field. Every asteroid, every space station, every piece of orbital debris had been converted into either a weapon or a hiding place for weapons. They had won because they approached warfare in a way that no other species in the 12,000-year history of galactic civilization had ever considered, as a contest of will rather than a rational calculation of costs and benefits. As human voices began speaking in their harsh, angular language outside her pod, Zethkara transmitted one final message to Hegemony High Command on a quantum channel that would take months to reach the galactic core. Emergency Priority 1. Do not engage the humans in direct military conflict. Recommend immediate reclassification from primitive species suitable for subjugation to apex predator species requiring extreme diplomatic caution. The response came back almost immediately, carried by quantum entanglement across impossible distances. Explain classification change. Intelligence reports indicate technological inferiority. Zethkara watched through her viewport as human soldiers in powered armor secured her pod with mechanical precision. Their movements efficient and professional despite having just fought the most brutal space battle in recorded galactic history. She could see other pods being collected by similar teams, the humans showing no signs of the exhaustion or trauma that should have followed such intense combat. Intelligence assessment was catastrophically flawed, she transmitted back. They don't fight like any species we've encountered. They don't fight to achieve strategic objectives or minimize acceptable losses. They fight to completely destroy their enemies, and they're willing to sacrifice everything to achieve total victory. Command, I think we just declared war on the galaxy's first pure warrior species. The communication channel fell silent as her words reached the high command chambers on distant Hegemon Prime. Across the galaxy, in council chambers that had never known military defeat, ancient minds began to comprehend that their carefully ordered universe had just encountered something unprecedented and terrifying. The cutting beam that sliced through her pod's airlock interrupted her thoughts. As the humans boarded her escape craft, Zethkara found herself wondering if the hegemony had just made a mistake that would echo across the stars for millennia to come. On Earth, General Hayes was already reviewing preliminary battle reports while planning humanity's next strategic move. The aliens had revealed themselves, which confirmed there were more of them scattered across the galaxy. And if there was one principle that human military doctrine had learned from 10,000 years of evolutionary warfare, it was that the most effective defense was often an overwhelming offense. The hegemony had initiated what they thought would be a simple conquest of a primitive world. Instead, they had awakened something they didn't understand and couldn't control. A species that had spent its entire evolutionary history perfecting not just the technology of warfare, but the psychology of total victory. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their innovation or their tactics. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat under any circumstances. And for the first time in 12,000 years of unchallenged dominance, the hegemony found itself facing an enemy that simply would not surrender, no matter the odds. The age of human expansion was about to begin. Author's note: this story explores the classic HFY theme of humanity's unique approach to conflict and warfare, suggesting that what other species might see as primitive aggression could actually be humanity's greatest strength in a galactic context.